How does an engineer, a farmer, or any citizen become a force in legal reform and government accountability? The answer is, it is in your gut. Most people don't have enough passion to demand change. Most, over time, fall to the wayside as victims as to the length and breadth of time it takes to make change happen. My guest today is Bob Schulz, founder of We the People. Bob has that unyielding commitment for honesty in government, and at FIT, we hope he's successful, because God knows there is lots to be concerned about in our corrupt government. Welcome, Bob Schulz.
Hey, thank you, Chris. Great.
What we need to hear, because a lot of people don't know you, and my audience has not had a chance to know you, tell us a little bit about how you got involved in these issues of legal reform and in government accountability.
Okay, well, I'm 76, and until I was maybe 40, 41, I had been raised to believe that government is always benevolent, always has the public interest uppermost in its mind, and that our public officials are people with white hats and you can trust them.
Surprise, surprise, right?
But all of that changed. 1979, I live on the east side of Lake George. I settled there, raising 4 kids, thoroughbred horses and racing them, and sheep. Life was good. But I discovered that my town and county government were advancing a project in the Lake George area while they were breaking the law. And I tried to reason with them, tried to ask them questions. They said no questions. In the end, I had to sue them. I had never had an attorney, never sued the government, but here I was.
You wanted to know if this was America, right? Because they were doing something illegal and you wanted to check on it.
Right, and they were public officials, and we live under the rule of law, not the rule of whim or the rule of man, but the rule of law. And so I had to take them to court, and in 1982, in a very robust decision, the High Court of this state gave all the relief I was asking for. They undid the resolutions passed by the town and county board and undid the results of a countywide referendum where, based entirely on what the government was telling the people, they voted overwhelmingly for this project.
Real quickly, how were these people going to be affected if that had passed, and what happened and how they feel about it now?
Well, what the proposal was, those familiar with Lake George, it's a 32-mile long lake, and the proposal was to run a sewer line down both sides of the lake, bring it together at the village of Lake George, take all that wastewater down Route 9 to the Hudson River, where they would build a treatment plant and treat the waste and put the effluent in the Hudson. But they were going to close everybody's on-site septic system down and hook them all into this government system, charge them a fee, of course. But it was all unnecessary, totally unnecessary. And we discovered that those in government were advancing this project to benefit them and their friends, but at everybody else's expense. And so we had to take them to court, and we won. But it changed my life. Yeah. I learned from that experience that government is not above manufacturing a crisis and concocting or prescribing a solution that's going to benefit them at everybody else's expense. And I took it, the takeaway from that was that as a citizen, it is my responsibility to pay more attention to what government is saying and doing and compare what they're doing with the law. And if we see them stepping outside the boundaries that we, the people, have drawn around their power, it's up to us to challenge them, to hold them accountable.
And you've been doing this for about how many years now?
36 years.
Okay. Hopefully you've had some success.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we have. Yeah, well, in the early days, life was good, and we were winning a number of cases. I prevailed in a case against a mayor of a city upstate, town, county, school district, Mario Cuomo, the governor, a couple of times.
And on your side is the people.
Yes, and defense of the Constitution, in my view, is service to God. And so it was all about defense of our state constitution, which I didn't know existed until I was nearly 50 years old.
I only found out about recently meeting you and talking about it a few years ago, yeah.
Yeah, well, this is extraordinarily important. Let me just hold this up a minute. This is what it looks like. This is the state constitution.
You want to show it to that?
And most people do not know that this exists.
Hold it still.
It's not taught in school, but yet, here's what it means. First of all, it was adopted in 1777 our state constitution some 12 years before the U.S. Constitution was adopted. And by these words, we the people are structuring our government and we're regulating it. By these words, we tell the government what they can do, what they cannot do, and what they must do. This is the people speaking. No word finds its way in or out of our state constitution except by a vote of the people. This is the people speaking. This is above the governor, it's above the legislature, it's above the judiciary, and most people don't know it exists. The tragedy is...
That's already a tragedy that they don't know it exists, because we can do something about it.
Well, in 1947, the state legislature passed a law. I'm glad you're sitting down. They passed a law. It's Section 801 of the state education law, those who are taking notes. And this is what it says. All teachers of the state will teach all children of this state in public and private school from grade 8 on. What? I'm quoting.
Civic education.
The history, these are the words, the history, the meaning, the significance, and the effect of every provision in our state and federal constitutions and our Declaration of Independence. So in other words, by the time each rising generation leaves high school, they are to know there's a state as well as a federal constitution, what's in it, how it got there, and the power of it.
What happened?
And yet I graduated, my wife and I graduated from East Meadow High School, first graduating class in 1957. We weren't taught. My kids haven't been taught. My grandkids haven't been taught. People don't know that the document exists, much less what's in it. So if they don't know that, how are they able to hold the government accountable? How are they able to keep them in the place?
How is it a government for the people?
Right. It's not a government of, by, and for the people.
Right.
And over time, the government grows and gets bloated and corrupt and steps outside the boundaries. Jefferson said, when government takes one step outside the boundaries drawn around their power, they take possession of a boundless field of power. And so it's important for the people to know that they have the ultimate power in our society, and that we have to constantly be alert and be watching what government is doing, comparing what they're doing with what they're allowed to do and prohibited from doing, and then to hold them accountable.
To me, it just seems like there's too much common sense here. I think that if that was the original design, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay. What happened? What caused this to veer from what design would have created?
People are not informed. In my view, public education has all but taken over private education. At one time, it was all private education. Most of the religious institutions had their religious schools, and people knew these things. But public education has all but taken over private education. Yes, there's some private education around. But with public education, it's government schools. And the government, I don't think they sat around and made a constructive decision, but what's happened is they have decided it's not in its best interest. It's not in the interest of government to teach the children that they have the ultimate power in our society, and that it's a servant government. The Declaration of Independence lays out all of these essential principles. The one I like the best is where it says, people institute the government to secure their rights. That's the single purpose of government, is to secure our rights. But that's not what's happening anymore. It's become the effectiveness of enforcement. It's up to us to enforce the rule book. But it's become very ineffective.
Our enforcement so far away from that right now. I don't think there's a person that's going to watch this program that's going to say, of course, let's do it. So they're removed from the probability of it happening. What you're hoping to do is educate the public and let them know that that's what should be happening. But look at the dogfight we have to go through to get it to happen.
Yeah, it's very. There are many of me around. I know all across the state there are individuals who never miss a town board meeting or a county legislature meeting.
Right, I know some of
They
those people,
watch the state legislature, and they'll try to hold them accountable, whether they bring them to court or in some other way. But individuals have a very hard time prevailing. What's needed is a mass movement of people committed to holding the government accountable. How big a movement? If you could get 3% of the people of this state of voting age, you would have a movement that would be larger
Significant.
than the top 3 lobbying organizations in this state put together. 3%.
Without the funding, maybe, but they'd still be a bigger
Well,
group.
a movement where they might spend $1 a year or $10 a year, to support the organization.
Is this message you responded to that I saw on film on your YouTube event to Judge Napolitano? Can you talk about that now?
Yeah, as I recall,
The monitoring and
yeah, as I recall, the subject of my interview with Judge Napolitano on his show was the right to petition government for redress of grievances. Extraordinarily important. The First Amendment, as most people know, guarantees 5 fundamental rights: the right to free worship, the right to speak freely, the right to write freely, the right of free press, the right to assemble so we can get together and criticize the government without having our heads cut off, and the last one, the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. The last 10 words are the right to petition government for the redress means remedy, to remedy grievances. And believe it or not, the courts have weighed in, of course, on the first 4. We pretty much know what our rights are and what the obligations of the government are in terms of worship, speech, press, and assembly. But no court has ever declared what the rights of the people are and the obligations of the government under the last 10 words of the First Amendment. So if you don't have court decisions like Supreme Court decision to fall back on, what we do in the legal community is we take the framers' intent approach. We take a look at the way the world was before those words were added, who said what when they were adding the words, and what was the world like in the years after, okay? So the first time the right to petition, the right to hold government accountable by petitioning them for redress of grievances, was first written in the Magna Carta of 1215. And in there you find out that
They say that was the beginning of our Constitution, some say.
Well,
In 1215,
it's the
it
cradle
was-
of liberty.
yeah.
The Magna Carta is the cradle of liberty. All of Western civilization has evolved from the Magna Carta of 1215. At the time it was signed, the king and the queen, they had absolute power. Nobody could question them. Nobody could sue them. They could, if they didn't like what you were saying, they could put you away.
Effort come from the people. The first effort of that. maybe.
Yeah, and so he, of course, he was under a little pressure. There were a lot of people out there with pitchforks out in Runnymede. King John was under a little pressure, but he signed the Magna Carta. And what section, people should Google Magna Carta 1215, section 61. And you see that what the king signed was, if the people have, this is what it says, if the people have any evidence that government is infringing on your human rights and not appropriately keeping the peace, then the people can petition for redress of those grievances.
Which is basically this item that's missing out of
Right,
it. Yeah.
and then he goes on, what about the obligation of government to respond? He goes on, and he says, and if we do not respond, I'm quoting, if we don't respond in 40 days, you the people have the right to take everything we own, including our castles, lands, and possessions. And then, having determined the relief that you were seeking, you may, not shall, but you may then restore your or return your loyalty to.
Sounds like he was leaving the ship.
No,
Giving up the-
but he was saying freedom, and you have the ultimate power.
Yeah.
The people have the ultimate power.
He's giving up his power.
Yeah. Well, he was under a little pressure.
We say.
But our founders, of course, knew the Magna Carta and the English Bill of Rights and everything that followed, and they wrote what they wrote.
Does at all anything that happened recently that the newsworthy things like the IRS's different change in terms of using enforcement rights or having that new ability to enforce rights, or the NSA leaks and things like that? Is there anything that we can point to in our effort to try to make the Constitution powerful and valid in today's world.
Well, we can petition for redress, but again, individuals and small groups have a very hard time speaking to power.
If
today.
if everyone knows this, and everyone knows that happened, why wouldn't the voice of the people? Am I being silly about this whole thing?
No, that's what I devote my life to.
Okay.
Is getting that, organizing the people. It's all about organization, and getting enough people working together, putting a collective foot down against the tyrants of our day.
Back to Napolitano for just a second. There was constitutional monitors. We didn't hit on that, but you had suggested that in the video that was a good idea. So you want to break that down for how that looked?
Yeah. So the plan, the vision I have,
Yeah.
and many people picking up on it, thank God, is to have constitution monitors. These will be people trained and certified by We the People organization to detect, trained to detect potential violations of the rule of law. So you might, Chris, you might be assigned, you may choose
Suffolk County.
to follow the county legislature
Right.
here, okay? You and a couple of your friends. And you're there, you know what's going on, you're on their mailing list. When they put out the agenda for the next meeting, you're getting it.
I see fights in developing and getting these people together to agree on who would be a delegate.
Well, people willing, retired or semi-retired people, because it takes a little time, people willing to learn the basics. There's a constitution, state and federal, generally what's in it, and here are the laws of the state, and generally what's in them. And so then they're monitoring their government, and they're trained to detect a potential violation of the rule of law. They will be then trained to fill out a one-page petition for redress of grievances. This is what you're doing, this is what the law says, please stop, or something to that effect. And then
A warning shot.
And then they have, but you say to them respectfully, we're entitled to our version of the law, but we're not entitled to our version of the facts. Maybe we got our facts wrong, so please refute these facts, tell us where we're wrong, but don't ignore the law and then ignore this petition.
This is kind of a governing body that would be outside the framework of any kind of legal enforcement, right?
Well, it's the fourth branch. It's us. It's the people. Okay? And let's say the government doesn't respond responsively to that petition for redress. What will then happen in our plan?
Right.
That petition, say from you, the county legislature ignored you. First they ignore the law, in your opinion, and then they ignore your petition. In our plan, what would you do with that? You would send it to the Citizen Vigilance Center. This is part of the plan. This will be a facility in Albany, outside Albany, where there'll be lawyers, people trained in the law, not necessarily attorneys, but lawyers and paralegals and staff. They will receive these petitions for redress of grievances from the Chris DiMaggios around the state. And they will investigate, and then they will recommend a course of action, either legal or civic action. And the civic action then would be carried out by all the members. The bulk of the membership of the organization will not have the time to be on the front line monitoring the towns and cities and counties, but they believe and they're willing to be called upon, not to get their musket out of their closet, because the king's men are, coming into town, but ready to step out and step up and join with many other people in putting their collective foot down in civic action or legal action.
It sounds like a great idea. I wonder how other people who are not part of the delegation would respond to the delegation's efforts. Well, I mean, I don't know. It's just throwing out a question.
The people who are not part of the movement will soon become part of the movement.
All right.
Because they will see that all they're trying to do is keep the government within the boundaries drawn around their power, because every time they step out, it has a serious adverse consequence on our economy.
We see that now.
On our family economics,
right.
On jobs and so forth. When government violates the rule of law, it has a devastating adverse impact on all of us. And they will cheer people who are intelligent, taking an intelligent, rational, professional approach to holding the government accountable.
Let's take the last couple of minutes we have here in this program to talk about the new work you're doing with the New York State Convention and to the New York State Constitutional Convention, right?
Yeah, thank God. And it took people spilling blood to get this in our state constitution.
There's another thing people don't know. They don't know we have a state constitution. I'm sorry,
Right,
go ahead.
and so when we adopted our state constitution on April 20th, 1777, there was no provision in it to amend it. And so the state legislature amended it 5 times over the first 20 years, and people were getting pretty upset over this. This is their document. This is our document. And the legislature was making changes to it without the approval of the people. And there was some violence. People stood up, you know, and so now we have an amendment article. And the article includes a provision that says every 20 years, this question will go on the ballot for all the people to vote on. The question is, quote, shall there be a convention to revise the Constitution and amend the same? And if the people vote yes, then the following year they will elect delegates, 3 from each state senatorial district and 15 at large. So 214 delegates will be elected, and they will take their seats and they will begin evaluating the performance of the government that we now have and recommending changes to this document to tighten up their control over the government and to get them back under their control.
So this is the hope of the state.
So our organization...
You're going to get you're signing a convention. You're going to have a constitutional convention first, right?
No, our position is we should vote yes. And then the following year, in November of 2018, people will elect their delegates. Our challenge as the people is to make sure we put up a good slate of candidates to be the delegates at the state constitutional convention and make sure that those in government or close to government do not become delegates at the next state constitutional convention. We don't want government controlling a people's constitutional convention.
Okay, in the last minute, could you tell us about any other problems you're having while you're doing this? Is there anything that we can do to help you? Because this is very, very important, the Constitutional Convention.
Getting the word out is going to be extraordinarily important. And so we're going to have a website soon, which will be WTP-NY, We the People NY, ConCon.com. That'll be up soon. And we want people, the best and the brightest of each of the state senatorial districts, to step up, be willing to be a delegate, be willing to run for one of those seats from their district. And so on our website, we'll provide the capability for people like yourself to put their picture, their bio, and a statement as to why you want to be a delegate at the next New York State Constitutional Convention. And then we'll vote in November of next year, 2017.
Let's get this right in terms of the dates. 2017, which is next year. This is 2016, mid-year July. So you're talking about...
November of 2017, we will vote.
Oh, November, so it has to go the full. All right,
right.
So we're talking
we'll
14 months.
We'll vote, do we want a state constitutional convention? So between now and then, we want to make sure that we've got a good slate of candidates all across the state, 214. 15 at large, and 3 from each state. There are 63 senatorial districts, state senatorial districts. We'll elect 3 from each of those districts. And when we know that the people are willing to step up and get tighter control over their government, then we vote yes in 2017, November 2017, and those who are elected will take their seat in April of 2019. Begin their work.
What happened to 18? Jumped over a year. 17, you're voting on the convention, and 18,
you're voting for the delegates.
The delegates, okay.
And they take their seats in April of 2019.
Thanks for that information. I hope this Constitutional Convention is very much in the forefront of everyone's mind. Thank you very much, Bob Schulz. You've been watching Gray Matters, the program that puts you light on the society that surrounds you. From the baby boomer generation to the present, we bring the current events, political and hot-button issues into the examination room. A new look on the social conditions of the day. measuring the inception and the path and the landing of our narratives in a full cultural and historical perspective. So connect the dots with us. Next week, we'll be right here.